So, Boondocks episode 4. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Boondocks. Boondogs. I realize I keep saying Boondogs. I don't know why, but I realize that it's written Boondocks. The Boondocks. Actually don't know what it means. So if anybody knows what that means, can you put it in the comment section? But episode 4. 1, introduction. 2, crazy. 3, more character development. And I wonder if episode 4 is going to be just continuing more of what the show is, right? I think it's really good quality. I like the art style because it's such an interesting mix of American animation and anime, like Japanese anime, which is fascinating, with very South Park-esque comedy from more of a perspective of a black kid, you know, not like a poor kid, Jew kid, and just an average kid from a small town in South Park, right? So it's very similar style and the theme. I really like it. So let's go with episode 4. I've seen this joke, I think.
Watch where you walking, nigga. Hey, what you say?
Okay, so now we're going with the more outrageous.
You're about to experience a nigga moment.
I see.
The nigga moment as a moment where ignorance overwhelms the mind of an otherwise logical Negro male.
What did you say, bitch, nigga? Hey, squeeze it, nigga.
Causing him to act in an illogical, self-destructive manner, i.e., like a nigga.
That's so there's a theme. There's a theme of a crazy episode, rational episode, crazy episode.
Unpredictable.
And I feel like we're in a crazy episode again.
They all end up bad. If they had their own category, nigga moments would be the third leading killer of black men behind pork chops and FEMA. It's a fact. Now let's see how a nigga moment affects a white man.
Watch where you walking, bitch.
What did you... Wait a minute. I'm white.
Where you going?
I've seen that clip.
This is a perfectly good moment to throw your life away.
A big misconception about the nigga moment is that it can be avoided by simply moving away from niggas. If only it were that easy.
I've never seen this full context.
Always got a new trick right around the corner.
I've never seen the full clip, so I'm very interested to see where this goes. That's an... But that's an interesting concept. You think you'll be better if you just walk away? Necessarily not. That's interesting. I want to see where this goes.
Without that key element,
And I like that. That's a very different kind of guy that you would expect, which is true. I mean...
This some more bullshit.
so he didn't particular misery and hatred.
There are people like that.
It was his love of hate.
And that is another irony. That's true. There's a lot of people who you would not think that should survive or would survive, do survive, and just keep spreading negativity. Again, that's such a fascinating thing because that's the other side of a Karen, right? Just a negative piece of shit. Like just somebody who creates problems for everybody, no matter where they go. Again, relatable. This show makes everything more relatable, more reasonable, more like gives you a little like olive branch that I'm like, yeah, I will come to this journey with you. It's not hating anything or anybody. It's just bringing a lot of stuff out in a new perspective, right? Fascinating. I like the show. I like it. Yeah. That's such an interesting way of putting it. I like that because that's true. It's like sometimes you want to slap a motherfucker, but at the same time you should walk away, but you might be stuck in a situation like this. So what do you do? Yeah, and it would be a kid who like wants to do that, but then like, can you be more reasonable? Yeah. And what they're doing is gonna fuck with his shoes.
I've said it before. Expensive sneakers are like $150 landmines. Step on one and boom! A perfectly rational black man can explode.
I knew those were gonna go there. Ow. Yeah. Now you're stuck in that situation too. But it's interesting that they on purpose made him to be a blind dude, an old dude and all that to really emphasize the fact that you're not threatened by the situation by a muscular guy, big guy, black guy, anything. That's not the point. The point is that it's an irrational, difficult human being who's just making a situation worse, and you can choose to go with it, make it worse, potentially making it horrible by maybe punching a guy or something. They fall and hit their head and die, and now you're stuck in a horrible situation where you should have never been, or try to walk away. But what do you do? Because you might be still stuck with it, you know, legally or whatever. So yes, very difficult.
Maybe I should get a blindfold first.
God.
Okay, I'm ready. Wait, maybe he gonna fall on me.
That would be so annoying. And it's again showing that he has that. Well, he's childish, right? He's younger, so it's reasonable for him to be childish and idiotic. But then the older kid being like, "You're not making the situation any better." I wonder where this is going because we see it in the opening, and I've seen that in like Google when I was looking at thumbnails. This, I think we've all like seen some. There's an old 80s, 70s movie about a guy who was a blind dude who had this amazing samurai sword, and he would cut people open with it. I forget the name, but I used to watch it with my brother all the time. He was a white guy who had like this, I remember, very simple samurai sword. Was the actor who was in Blade Runner, the blonde-haired main dude in the 80s Blade Runner? Was that the actor? That's a hell of a nightmare. Yeah, and then he could be the one who would get even prosecuted, yeah, because he's the one who instigated the violence, even though not really.
Righty well.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty, yeah. It's like, how do you let it go, and that might haunt you and affect you in some other ways, and the community or people or comments or whatever, right? Yeah. And in a way, he would deserve it as well, but what does it really do? That's the point, right? It's like, what does it really do when you just argue with a person like that? Does it really change anything? So it is an interesting vehicle for story. It's an interesting vehicle for storytelling where the younger kid is like juvenile. Huh? 2 weeks? Oh, it's gonna happen in 2 weeks. Okay, yeah. But I was going to say, it's a very interesting vehicle for storytelling where you have the more juvenile, childish little brother and then the elder tween or whatever, where he can start having like thoughts of his own and he can actually reflect on things. And maybe he thinks that he's smarter than he is, but which also makes him funny because he'll be more arrogant and stuff like that. But it still is reasonable for him to like question, be rebellious and say how it is, be childish and honest. But then you have the more childish one, which I don't want to say, but it seems like that the younger one is usually the more ignorant one. Like in this situation, he's the Karen, let's put it that way. The white version of that would be Karen, right? So he is the Karen in that situation, so you're kind of showing how fucking childish it is. Like, that's the child that is cheering you on. In the comments, in the community, in whatever, buying your album, right? Is that child is just pushing you to do more dumb shit, right? And that's who you're like listening to, essentially. Whereas then you can have somebody who's a bit more like reasonable and has some thoughts to it.
Black heavyweight fighter. Name one. Go ahead. Name one. See that you can't do it.
No, not one. There's not one. And I wonder if this kind of conversations happen all the time, which I can kind of imagine happening, because I know names. Michael Phelps, amazing athlete, or Usyk right now, Alexander Usyk, who's the Ukrainian heavyweight champion and all that, Tyson Furies and all that, right? Nikola Jokic or even Caitlyn Clark. Caitlyn Jenner is the other dude, but Caitlyn Clark, the female, the best women's basketball player right now. So I can name like white people as well to prove a point. So his behavior is reasonable. People do that where they like try to memorize different kinds of things to argue and all that, right? So it's kind of worrisome if I can recognize that I behave like Ruckus as well sometimes, that I can like count people to represent something, an argument in my head, you know? It's true too. Yeah, it's also a very powerful message.
Public nigga moment seems a whole race.
Touche. I like whoever you represent, obviously, you know.
Nobody's gonna call you a fruity boy or a pansy pants.
Well, they will, but it's just you have to have the strength to move on from it. That's the point. You gotta move on. Just don't care. Don't listen to it. Somebody's saying a word from you versus you being locked up in jail. It's like that's what he was trying to say, but
Gotten lucky.
yeah. And what's gonna make him better by beating up a helpless blind man? How's that gonna make him look any better? Yeah, now it's just gonna look like you're a bully, right? I mean, he deserves it though. He's a piece of shit, but yeah, just makes you look like an ignorant idiot.
You know, we could all be reading a book right now.
Yep. There's a lot of other things you could be doing, but because somebody said a word or did a thing, now you think it's worth like risking time. It's everywhere. In Finland, the same thing. I was taught not to do that kind of stuff by my parents. Because, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like something bad could happen. So that was that reference why we had that chair there. Oh my god, a chair! Ah! Yeah. It is true, chaos does erupt pretty quickly.
He was still pretty shook up by the whole thing.
You're clever.
He was a horrible, awful human being, and in truth, the world was better off with him dead. Still, he was our brother.
Give us for taking this man's life.
So there's definitely like a flavor nuance there that isn't like doesn't have anything to do with me, like him saying that even if he's a piece of shit and maybe the world's a better place without him, that it was still like one of us. I don't know if I agree with that, but again, that's a context that I don't understand. Being American culture, you know, American black cultures or that kind of stuff, I don't know if that really... I mean, I guess that is a part of Finnish culture as well, that even if you're a criminal, you still do have like the right for second chance and improve yourself. So I guess that's what it's saying. So yeah, sure. Yeah, I do think that you should like try to help people, and even if somebody else is a piece of shit doesn't give you the right to be more of a piece of shit and that kind of stuff. So that's true. But yeah, just some context that I'm not a part of, so it's hard to say. But beyond that, I've never seen that full thing. I think I've seen that clip on TikTok or on Instagram, whatever. My friend might have shown some of it. That is definitely a very classic joke, which is again heavy subjects, crazy subjects to really talk about. I kind of see now what they're doing is they're using an interesting story device to remove things out of context while still the target audience will understand the context. What I mean by that is, previous episode, why would there be episode 3, there was the hoe who was using him for his money, right? Now in this situation, you have these people who have something and they have something to prove, and somebody does something bad, so they go into this fight and all that. Obviously, when you take it like at face value, it doesn't especially make any sense. Upper middle class, you know, older black dude, why would he do all that kind of stuff? So what they're doing is they're removing the thugness out of it. They're removing the urban out of it, right? They're literally putting these people into a suburban environment, or even a bit wealthier environment in general, to make these situations more glaringly obvious how silly they are, right? Where it's not just like, oh, it's an urban thing, so I don't understand, or whatever, right? R. Kelly is like, well, he's just a criminal. Like, he just is a criminal. That's it. Like, it's nothing else. It's just he's a criminal, right? He's just a criminal. And these situations necessarily... So it's a really good way of like talking about these situations and not making it about somebody being 6'5" and muscular, right? Like in the beginning, it was like, oh, you know, this is a Karen moment. I'll call Karen moment. I think it's the same thing. And obviously you show two thugs, but it's not just that. It really is, you can just do that in any kind of situation. You can just be a difficult person. You can just create problems where you go, and you can respond to that by just making it worse or walking away. Sometimes it's hard to walk away from it, and that's reality, but what you still do is very important. At least for us in Finland, I remember in middle school, we had a cop come into school to talk about this kind of stuff, and he mentioned how it's very common to joke around with your friends, and I distinctly remember 2 examples. One example was that you might kind of like punch somebody, and they might flinch, and they might still hit their head on something, and that can really cause damage. And that's pretty common in like school, like bathrooms and stuff like that, where because you're just horsing around, you might still really end up hurting somebody. So was it really worth it? But another thing is that even if you, for example, I remember a horror story, there was essentially, they're talking about, because in Finland, okay, good culture thing. What is a Finland, that moment, Karen moment, what is a Finnish Karen moment is you're drunk on a Friday, you're going home after been drinking with your friends or by yourself, because whatever, you can drink however you want in Finland. It's not just about partying, it's just getting drunk. You go to a thing called essentially sausage kiosk, nakkikioski, right? So you go to this fast food place in the middle of the night, and often what they would be is in a corner of some kind of like street corner section. And you would have some kind of little tiny place where you can buy some fast food. And we have these things that are called lihapiirakka and sausages and stuff like that. It's essentially just fried dough with some meat inside of it, and you can just eat that when you're drunk, obviously. Or a kebab, whatever, but that's the traditional thing, is nakkikioski jonossa. So in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., you're drunk, you want some food, you're hungry, and in that line, when you're waiting for food, you'll get into a fight. That is the Finnish equivalent of a Karen moment. So the police used an example of you get into a fight, and maybe you just push somebody. Somebody just gets pushed and they fall, they get up, they say like, screw this, I'm going home. And then the next day, they never wake up. Because what happened was they fell and they whipped their head and they hit their head on the ground, and their brain will move in their skull and all the small veins will pop, and you'll be okay now, but you'll have internal bleeding, and you're drunk. You don't realize that. You go home and you pass out because you think you're just drunk, but then you never wake up because you have internal bleeding. So that is like the Finnish equivalent of that Karen moment. And the police used that as an example. That is it worth it? Is there any reason to push somebody, to attack somebody, to assault somebody, batter anybody for any reason like that when you could just walk away and go home and just sleep, right? So that's why I think that's such a good story thing, is that they really removed the youth out of it, drinking out of it, or muscular stuff out of it, ego stuff out of it. It really just is somebody's being difficult. What do you choose to do? Make it worse or walk away, right? While still talking about black culture, sneakers, whatever, jokes, humor, whatever, exaggeration, there's still cultural stuff there, specific stuff there. You can kind of remove it from that context a little bit to make it a bit more understanding for everybody else in the world. And me as a Finnish guy, I can still understand that joke. It's like, you sometimes just want to slap somebody in the fucking face for being a piece of shit, right? It's like, fuck off. But is it really worth it, right? Good episode, heavier subject. So now I know the pattern. It's a more safe episode and then a crazier episode, or heavier subject is what I should say. But I really like it. That was episode 4, and let's continue with episode 5 at some point. First, I'll edit these. Thank you very much. Bye.